I went to the landfill to scavenge for vintage furniture, but instead, I found my own wedding dress discarded in the dirt. Then, I found the photographs of me sleeping, and the man I was supposed to marry was watching from the shadows. The local landfill isn't exactly where you expect to find your future, but then again, my future hadn't exactly been going according to plan. It was a Tuesday, the kind of gray, miserable afternoon where the sky seems to sag under the weight of its own gloom. I was out there scavenging, not because I'm destitute, but because I'm a restorer of vintage furniture, and there's a specific kind of graveyard thrill in finding a discarded mahogany vanity that just needs a little bit of love and a lot of elbow grease to shine again. I was waist-deep in a pile of industrial-sized black bags near the edge of the scrap metal sector when I saw it. It wasn't a vanity, it was a spill of white silk, thick and shimmering even under the layer of grime. I pulled it out, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. It was a dress. My dress. Or at least it was the exact model of the custom-made lace gown I had ordered 6 months ago. The one that was supposed to be sitting in a climate-controlled box in my bedroom closet, awaiting the big day in September. I shook the fabric out, dirt raining down like gray snow. The lace was torn at the hem, and there was a dark, oily smudge across the bodice. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded my veins. My dress was supposed to be at home. My fiancé, Mark, had insisted on picking it up from the boutique last week because I was too stressed to handle the logistics. He'd brought the garment bag into the house, hung it in the guest room, and told me not to touch it until the final fitting. Seeing it here, discarded in a pile of rotting waste, felt like a physical blow to my gut. I stood there, trembling, clutching the ruin of my dreams in my shaking hands. Why would he throw it away? Was the wedding off? Had he changed his mind? The silence of the landfill suddenly felt suffocating, punctuated only by the distant cawing of crows. I needed answers, but as I turned to head back to my truck, my foot caught on something heavy, a steel casing half buried under a heap of rusted garden shears. I pulled it out, and the breath hitched in my throat. It was his signature toolbox, the one he guarded like a holy relic, the one he used for his delicate, intricate woodworking projects. It was locked, just as it always was, but the impact of the fall had popped the latch. As I knelt in the dirt, my fingers trembling, I pried the lid open. My intention was just to see if he had emptied his tools, perhaps in some manic cleaning spree, but what greeted me wasn't a set of chisels or measuring tapes. Tucked neatly into the velvet-lined tray, nestled among a set of heavy-duty pliers, was a thick manila envelope addressed to me, sealed with tape and stained with a dark, viscous substance that looked disturbingly like dried blood. I stared at the envelope, the cold wind whipping my hair across my face. I knew I should leave it. I knew I should walk away, drive home, and wait for Mark to walk through the door, so I could scream at him until my lungs gave out. But the weight of the envelope in my hands felt like gravity itself. I reached for the edge, my thumbnail catching the seal, and as I tore it open, a series of photographs slipped out, scattering onto the mud. They were photos of me. Not photos I'd taken, or photos from our life together. These were taken from inside our bedroom, inside our bathroom, and, most chillingly, inside the very closet where he had told me my dress was safely stored. As I stared at a photo of myself sleeping, taken from the vantage point of the closet door, I heard the faint, metallic click of a vehicle door closing behind me. I turned slowly, my heart stopping dead in my chest, and saw Mark's truck idling at the entrance of the dump, its headlights cutting through the gloom like the eyes of a predator. The engine of his truck didn't roar. It purred with that deceptive, quiet precision that always made Mark seem so controlled, so calm. I scrambled to my feet, the envelope and the photos crushed against my chest, my pulse drumming a frantic rhythm in my ears. The dress lay forgotten in the mud, a pale, ghostly specter of a life that had suddenly become a crime scene. I wanted to run, to sprint toward my own car parked 50 yards away, but my legs felt like they were cast in lead. Mark stepped out of the driver's side. He wasn't wearing his usual work clothes, the dust-caked overalls and the flannel shirt he wore to the workshop. He was dressed in a crisp, dark suit, looking as if he were heading to a funeral or a board meeting. He didn't shout. He didn't run. He just stood there, hands tucked deep into his pockets, watching me with a stillness that was far more terrifying than any outburst could have been. The sun was dipping lower, turning the sky the color of a bruised plum, casting long, distorted shadows across the mounds of refuse. "I told you not to go snooping, Elena," he said, his voice carrying clearly over the wind. It wasn't angry. It was disappointed, the way a teacher speaks to a child who has broken a fragile toy. "Mark, what is this?" I shouted back, my voice cracking. I held up the photo of me sleeping, the edges crinkling under my white-knuckled grip. "Why were you taking these? Why is my dress in the trash? Why did you bring me here?" He took a slow, deliberate step toward me, his leather boots crunching on broken glass and rusted iron. "I didn't bring you here," he said softly. "You found your way here all on your own. You have such a curious heart, don't you? Always looking under stones, always digging for things that were meant to stay buried." I backed away, my heel catching on a jagged piece of metal. I stumbled, nearly falling, but caught myself on a stack of discarded tires. "I'm leaving," I said, my voice trembling with a surge of adrenaline-fueled defiance. "I'm going to the police. I'm going to show them everything." Mark stopped moving. He tilted his head, a small, sad smile playing on his lips. He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a small metallic remote. He clicked a button, and I heard a sharp, rhythmic chirping sound, the sound of my own car alarm going off, far behind me in the lot. But the alarm stopped abruptly, replaced by a dense, heavy silence. "You aren't going to the police," he said, his tone shifting into something cold, clinical, and final. "Because you aren't leaving this place, not until you understand the design." I scanned the perimeter, desperate for an exit, but the heavy equipment, the bulldozers and the compactors, seemed to have been moved, blocking the narrow path leading to the road. I was trapped in a canyon of waste, cornered by a man I had promised to marry. My gaze darted back to his hands. He was pulling something else out of his pocket now, something that glinted in the dying light, a small, silver key. "Do you know why I made you custom furniture, Elena?" he asked, walking closer, his eyes locked on mine. "Because everything in this world is broken. Everything has a structural flaw. You just have to know where to apply the pressure to make it collapse." He reached the edge of the pile I was standing on. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the ground beneath my feet, at the precarious heap of scrap metal and debris I was precariously perched upon. He tapped his foot against a heavy, rusted lever, jutting out from a buried hydraulic press. "You were always so beautiful," he whispered, his eyes finally meeting mine with an expression of pure, unadulterated sorrow. "But beauty doesn't last if it isn't secured." With a sudden, violent shove of his boot, he kicked the lever down. A sickening sound of groaning metal erupted from beneath me, and the entire pile of debris beneath my feet shuddered, tilted, and began to slide. I shrieked as the ground gave way, and as I plummeted downward, I saw Mark drop the silver key into the darkness, right before the heavy steel trapdoor slammed shut above my head, plunging me into absolute, suffocating blackness. The descent was short, a jarring, bone-rattling tumble that ended with a sickening thud against a bed of damp, compacted refuse. For a heartbeat, there was only the sound of my own ragged gasps and the distant, muffled groan of the heavy steel door sealing above me. Then, silence. A silence so thick it felt like it was pressing against my eardrums, punctuated only by the drip of something viscous hitting the metal floor somewhere in the dark. I scrambled up, my hands slicing against sharp shards of glass and jagged wire. Every nerve in my body was screaming, white-hot with terror. I clawed at the air, trying to find the underside of the trap door, but my fingers met only cold, damp concrete walls that seemed to stretch upward into infinity. This wasn't just a pit, it was a structure, a hidden chamber beneath the landfill, cold and smelling of oil, rot, and the metallic tang of dried blood. "Mark!" I screamed, the sound tearing at my throat. "Mark, let me out!" There was no answer, but a faint light flickered to life above me, a small, recessed LED strip embedded in the ceiling, casting a sickly blue glow over my prison. It revealed that I wasn't alone. Along the walls were rows of glass-fronted cabinets, each one containing items from our home. A hairbrush with a few strands of my hair still tangled in the bristles. A half-finished mug of tea I'd left on the nightstand a month ago. A pair of my slippers, pristine and white. And there, in the center of the room, sat a wooden mannequin draped in the remnants of my wedding dress. It was displayed like a sacrificial altar. The lace I had pulled from the trash earlier was here, but it had been meticulously repaired, stitched with thin, dark wire that looked like spider silk. The oily smudge on the bodice wasn't oil at all. As I stepped closer, my legs shaking so violently I could barely stand, I realized it was dried ink, or blood, shaped into intricate, flowing letters. I leaned in, my breath hitching in my chest, and read the script stitched into the fabric. "Until death makes us one." A soft, rhythmic clicking sound started to echo through the chamber. A recording of my own voice, looped and distorted, playing from hidden speakers. It was me, laughing at a joke Mark had told months ago. It played over and over, slower each time, until the laughter sounded like the dry, raspy wheeze of a dying animal. Suddenly, the floor beneath me vibrated. A low, mechanical hum began to resonate through the walls, growing in intensity until the concrete deck beneath my feet felt like it was vibrating in sympathy with a heartbeat. I backed away, pressing my spine against the wall, as a section of the floor slowly retracted, revealing a deep, dark shaft that descended into the earth. From the depths of that shaft, a slow, steady stream of thick, black liquid began to bubble upward, filling the room with the suffocating smell of gasoline. My phone, tucked in my back pocket, buzzed. A single, sharp vibration that felt like a jolt of electricity. I fumbled for it with numb fingers. The screen lit up, illuminating the dark room. It was a text from Mark. "I forgot the best part, Elena. The foundation isn't finished. Check the pocket of the dress." My gaze snapped back to the mannequin. The dress hung stiffly, the wire-stitched lace looking like a cage. I reached out, my fingers trembling, and shoved my hand into the hidden side pocket of the gown. My fingers closed around something cold, sharp, and unmistakably heavy. It wasn't a key. It was a digital timer, its red numbers glowing steadily in the dark. 000300. As I stared at the descending countdown, the wall behind me swung open and I saw him. Not Mark, but something else. A figure in a mask made of my own discarded photographs, holding a heavy industrial-grade soldering iron, stepping into the room as the door clicked shut behind him. The masked figure didn't lunge. He simply stood there, the soldering iron hissing as a droplet of molten lead hit the concrete, sending up a puff of acrid gray smoke. Behind the mask, a collage of my own smiling face, fractured and taped together, I could see the glint of eyes that were far too calm. "Time is a design element, Elena," a voice rasped. It wasn't Mark's. It was a distorted recording, filtered through a digital modulator. "You keep trying to escape the structure. You don't understand that you are the centerpiece." The timer on the dress hit 2:15. My heart hammered against my ribs, a trapped bird desperate to break free. I looked at the figure, then at the shaft where the gasoline was bubbling up, turning the floor into a slick, treacherous hazard. I knew that fighting him with my bare hands was a losing game. I had to outthink the architect. "If I'm the centerpiece," I spat, my voice steadier than I felt, "then you've failed at your craft. Look at the dress. Look at how you ruined the symmetry." The figure paused, the head tilted, like a bird observing a worm. It was the ego, the one thing Mark couldn't suppress, even in his proxies. I stepped toward the mannequin, my hands trembling as I reached for the wedding dress. The figure took a step forward, the soldering iron raised. I didn't care. I grabbed the fabric, tearing the wire stitches with a scream of effort. The mannequin rocked, and I shoved it hard, not toward the figure but toward the open shaft. As the wooden frame tumbled into the dark black hole, the heavy, weighted base of the mannequin caught on the edge of the floor plate. The timer, still counting down, flickered violently. 01:05. "No!" the voice behind the mask shrieked, the modulation glitching into a high-pitched whine. The figure lunged for the mannequin, desperate to save his work. That was the opening I needed. I didn't run for the door. I ran for the wall, hitting the emergency hydraulic release I had spotted near the cabinets, a lever marked with the same insignia as the tools in the toolbox. I threw my entire weight against it. With a deafening roar of protesting hydraulics, the ceiling didn't just open. The entire room began to rotate, a massive hidden tumbler lock shifting into place. The figure lost his balance as the floor tilted, sliding toward the abyss with the mannequin. He grabbed the edge of the shaft, his masked face turning toward me, his eyes wide with a sudden, dawning terror. "You don't know what you've done," he hissed. "I finished the design," I whispered. I punched the last button on the panel, the emergency override. The shaft didn't just close. It triggered a massive, high-pressure deluge from the overhead cleaning system. A wall of water and industrial solvent crashed into the room, sweeping the masked figure and the mannequin into the dark, gaping maw of the earth. The timer hit 0:00:05. I scrambled toward the small crawl space that had opened in the ceiling as the floor finished its rotation. I didn't look back as I squeezed through the opening, my lungs burning from the gasoline fumes. I climbed, my nails tearing into the dirt, until I burst out into the cool, damp night air of the landfill. I didn't stop running until I reached my truck. I didn't call the police from the road. I drove straight to the precinct, the dress ruined, my skin smelling of rot and chemical fire. They found the chamber an hour later. They found the tools, the photos, and the evidence of a man who had spent years crafting a tomb for a life that refused to die. Mark was arrested in his workshop, sitting in the dark, surrounded by blueprints of my own home, blueprints that showed where he had planned to wire the house to collapse. I never wore the dress. I burned it in the same place I found it. But sometimes, even now, months later, when I'm working on a piece of vintage furniture, I'll hear a faint, rhythmic ticking coming from somewhere behind the walls. I don't go looking for it. I've learned that some things aren't meant to be fixed. They're just meant to be left in the dark, waiting for the floor to fall out from under them.